The fires outside Sydney have already forced evacuations and destroyed or damaged some 200 homes. Alfonso Van Marsh tells us firefighters fear that number will grow much larger.
At least 1,500 Australian firefighters are battling massive wildfires that have destroyed hundreds of homes and sparked mass evacuations across New South Wales, Australia's most populous state. An elderly man collapsed and died while defending his house from approaching flames. Those who lost their homes say they're devastated. Authorities say many fires are burning out of control, and they're predicting higher winds and temperatures will make things worse.
The optimism we had for good widespread rain seems to be disappearing.
Footage from one firefighter's helmet camera shows the danger they face. Thick smoke and the intense fire forced this group of firefighters to retreat. The cause of the fire is still unknown.
Europe's tallest and most active volcano, Mount Etna, has erupted, sending a vast plume of smoke and lava into the sky. The eruption did not cause significant disruption, although airspace over the southern Italian island of Sicily was briefly closed. Seismologists say the eruption was preceded by 15 small earthquakes since Friday. This is the 14th time that Etna has erupted in 2013, and while the volcano is almost constantly active, the last major eruption was in 1992. Whilst the eruptions themselves do not put the local population at risk, they do have to live with the ash showers that follow.
In February, a meteor strike in Russia did more than just light up the sky. More than 1,000 people were injured when an asteroid exploded over the city of Chelyabinsk. Experts called it an unusual event that occurs once every 100 or 200 years. But according to a new study from Nature International Weekly Journal of Science, Earth could be hit by a similar meteor strike once every 1 or 2 decades. That's a probability 10 times higher than previously thought. And that's an international concern. Next month, the United Nations General Assembly expects to establish an international asteroid warning network and call on the world's space agencies to come up with ways to deflect an asteroid. City College of New York physics professor Dr. Meteor spoke to CBS This Morning last month.
We are sitting ducks. That was a wake-up call, what happened in Russia, right? But we can't rely on luck forever. Sooner or later, it's inevitable a big one will hit the Earth.
We're talking about Friday by the time we get to Japan, that a 7.3 earthquake kicks off just off that northeastern coast Japan. If this coastline looks very familiar to you, it's because just last year there was a 9.0 magnitude quake there. That's the one that triggered that, not only that powerful earthquake, but the tsunami and then the nuclear disaster right along in that area in Fukushima. So to compare these two, this one is much, much weaker. This one sent a wall of water toward the coastline, but this one did trigger a tsunami warning. At points there was a 6-foot tsunami expected. Actually, a 3-foot wall of water did kind of work along the coastline. The tsunami warnings are canceled right now. Let me show you all the video coming out of, and this is from Tokyo. When you realize that you see these buildings shaking, this is more than 200 miles away from the center of this quake. So as frightening as that must have been, they didn't know how strong the quake was at the time that it was happening. And the buildings are shaking like this. There's also scenes of folks trying to cram into train stations because warning sirens were going off all along the coastline of Japan, telling people to get away from the shore. They knew this was going to be a powerful quake, and they knew there was the possibility of a tsunami.
Sam, this quake today was so reminiscent of that large quake in March of last year in so many ways. It hit just after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We felt the shaking in our Tokyo bureau, but it just got stronger and stronger and stronger. It lasted several minutes. Then the warnings for that tsunami. We heard one of the network anchors at one point call out to the residents saying, please do not forget about what happened last year. Please evacuate immediately. Just to give you an idea of the intensity of the shaking we experienced today, it was a 5 on a scale of 1 to 7 in Japan. The quake last year was a 6.
Looking at the aftermath of one of the strongest storms ever to tear across the ocean and smash into land. That super typhoon, 195-mile-per-hour winds cutting through the Philippines. Families there waking up to the reality of what they survived.
This is what it feels like inside a super typhoon. The waves crashing, camera shaking as 15 crew members who were working on a barge are just barely rescued from the turbulent ocean. Super Typhoon Haiyan raced across the Philippine Islands, kicking waves up to 19 feet high, winds up to 195 miles per hour. Power lines shredded, leaving millions unable to communicate. And tonight, we dive into the eye of the storm. Those winds so intense, this storm will likely go down as the strongest to make landfall.
And the wind speed is really what matters, not necessarily the size of the storm. So let's look at that super typhoon just before landfall yesterday. Now we measured the diameter of a storm. Well, in this super typhoon, it's about 300 miles across.
We are at Quiapo Church, and in this predominantly Catholic country, they're calling on the power of prayer. Bishops in every church leading the people in a prayer against impending casualties. Today, that number should become more clear.
That prayer still being asked for from around the world as the storm exits the Philippines. Next stop, Vietnam.